Are you confused about when to add two-dimensional pictures to your students' educational program when they have cortical visual impairment? Today we're going to be talking about two-dimensional pictures, the way that they can be presented, and which ones appear to work best with our students. Hi, I'm Diane Sheline. Welcome to Strategy to See, where we share tips, tricks, modifications, and strategies to use with students and children who have cortical visual impairment. Today we're going to be talking about two-dimensional pictures and what type is best to use and when is best to use them. It's a really complex area and we're going to just be briefly covering it today, and I'm going to show you some of the different ways to present pictures. But I think that the most important takeaway that you need to remember is that assessment is always important to do first. There are many different ways that pictures can be presented. We're just going to touch on a few of them today, but I want to give you some ideas of different ways to present pictures to your students and when you might be presenting them to them as the student gets better in their use of vision along the CVI range. In an earlier video, I think that I talked to you about making the Illumi-Spring. It's a Slinky Junior that's attached to an LED light. And I often find that this is one of the favorite and preferred targets of many of the students that I work with. And one of the first ways that you want to present pictures or 2D representations to your students is a picture of their favorite and preferred target. And so that's what I'm going to be using today, because I have presented the Slinky in many different forms and I want to share those with you. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be your student or child's preferred target. So you really need to take a look at what the preferred target is, because when you start to move to 2D representation, it's a really good idea to have that 2D representation be of a favorite preferred target that they're very, very used to. I'm just going to use as our sample today the illuminated Slinky, because I do have a lot of students that prefer that, and that is their preferred target. One thing that we have found that is helpful is that the first way that you present 2D images to students is of a color realistic image of that exact same target in backlit format. And so oftentimes I will do that on the iPad. And I oftentimes will just present the image, the real photographed image of the target on the iPad, or I will make a short story about that target. So in this case, I might make up a story about a lighted Slinky, a lighted yellow Slinky. And I use different programs such as Pictello, and I often use just a basic PowerPoint presentation or Keynote presentation. But Pictello is one that I particularly like, is an app that I particularly like. Another way to present your image in a backlit format is by taking a picture of the image and then photocopying it onto a color transparency. I use a very heavyweight piece of black paper, heavier than cardstock, maybe 85 to 100-pound weight blackboard. I cut a square in it and then put my transparency that's been photocopied with the image, I tape it to it on the back. I try to cut it so that it overlaps the edges of the APH light box. You can use any type of a light box apparatus to show it. I happen to use APH's light box that they provide, and I also have a more handy travel light box that I use that's very portable and battery operated. And then I just size it a little bit smaller. Again, I use the heavyweight paper, the color transparency with the photocopy right on the transparency, and insert that image right into a frame, so to speak, of the heavy paper. Once the student is a little bit better at recognizing the real image, maybe a backlit image like this, then you might be able to move to a more slightly cartoony image. And then I start creating books. And this book happens to be about the yellow slinky that is very, very long, like and then the teacher fills it in, what that slinky is long, like a snake, or something that the student would recognize. We're talking about salient features here of a long slinky. How about the slinky? The yellow slinky is very short, like a whatever might work well with that student, that student would relate to, that is short. Or the yellow slinky is curved, like a macaroni noodle, elbow macaroni noodle, maybe. Whatever the student understands that is curved. So again, you might want to make up a visual dictionary or a script to go with this and make sure that everybody is on the same page, so to speak, across all disciplines. If they're going to be using this book, you want the PT or the OT or the speech therapist or mom and dad or the classroom teacher to be using these same descriptive words, like the slinky is long like a snake. Everybody wants to use the same descriptive salient features that we're talking about that describe a long slinky. And you always want to have the real one there too, because here's the slinky that is long. Here's a slinky that is short. So always have your real one right next to whatever it is you're portraying. Let me just show you how I made these books using a Cricut maker. Okay, so I've just copied out general forms out of off of the internet of springs that would work well for slinkies, that looks like slinkies. I scanned it and put it into the Cricut program, and now I've saved it in my saved projects, and I can go ahead and bring it up, and you can see barely the black outline of the curved slinkies, the long slinky and the short slinky, and then it's going to be cutting it over here on the Cricut cutter. While this is cutting, I'll just let you know that if you go to my website and under DIY, pull down the window under DIY, I give specific instructions on how to upload different images and use the Cricut cutter to cut out different materials, in particular bubbled words for students with cortical visual impairment that are using the bubbling technique. So there's a list of specific directions how to use the Cricut cutter on my website under DIY that you can take a look at. Okay, so it's finished up here, cutting, and I'm just going to eject it. And then I'm going to click Finish on my Cricut. And then I just want you to see how beautifully it cuts it out. And then just for safety's sake, because I don't want to rip any of these very delicate pieces, even though this is 60-pound cardstock, it's better if you peel off this type of a fragile thing with a type of a Cricut pick that comes with it. I think they call this weeding. I might be using the wrong terms. But you see how you can just weed back and forth with this tool, and then it comes off a little bit easier, and you're not at risk of breaking or ripping anything. Okay, I'm just going to take a few minutes and quickly show you how I put these together using the Guerilla glue, the spray adhesive, and give you some little tips that I've learned over the past 6 or 8 months that I've been putting these books together, and then you don't have to go through the process that I did. You can go straight to what works. Okay, in this case, I've already punched and bound my book with, I use a True Bind binding machine and True Bind binders. And I've already done that in this case with this book. And I will tell you, if there is a piece that is difficult to get straight, once you use the Guerilla spray adhesive and you stick the item on the page, it's stuck on there and you can't pull it back off. So in this case, I've done enough of these curved rainbow shaped slinkies to know that my hand isn't steady enough to quickly get it very properly placed. So I do have a frame that I put onto the page that I use as a guide. Once that guide is in place, I take my piece that I'm going to spray, and I take an old brown paper grocery bag and I cut it down and fold it like this. And I always have it up in my office area because I'm always spraying and making books. But if you spray within this square here, and then I keep old magazines next to it and tear out a page and put it on top, and tear out a page and put it on top, so that I'm not using a sticky bottom when I go to spray my next piece. And this just makes it a little bit easier if you're doing a lot of books. So then I put my piece on one of the pages, the magazine pages, and this is about how much I spray it for this size piece. That's it. And then pick up your piece. With my template. It's fairly easy to get it straight. Take off the template. And then I use a piece of parchment paper and I lay that on top of what I just sprayed to push it down. You can use your fingers, but this just keeps it a little bit cleaner and it doesn't stick to the glue. And then pull it off, and you've got down your glued down target. I wanted to also mention that I often use black as my pages just because it helps to make the target stand out more sharply. But any type of contrasting surface in the back will be fine. What we're really trying to do is limit the complexity, or limit the complexity in the array. You want to make it as simple as possible. People often say, well, could I use a white background? Sure, you can use white pages as well. But the key is you want to make that target really pop, really stand out and pop. So if you just keep thinking about how to limit the complexity of the array, how to make it very simple and how to make that target pop, that's the main thing. You don't have to use black pages, but you want to make your target pop. Once all of those images are cut out, I usually add in a little bit of shading with a pencil is what I use in this case and in this scenario. And I also want to let you know that I use the Guerilla heavy-duty spray adhesive. It seems to work a little bit better to make these different the different cutouts adhere to the paper. I really like that. The other thing that I will point out is you do not need to have words down here on each page. That adds what? More complexity to the page. And so you can block them out with a blocking device, or in other situations, depending upon the student, maybe I just put the words on the back of the book so that they're not causing further complexity on the page. But it's your choice. And in this case, what I did is I used a shipping label that I put through the photocopier, and then I printed my words in with white letters and black background, and then I just cut the strips and put them on the bottom of the page. And that seems to add the least amount of complexity to each page. But again, if you're worried about it, you can always put the entire story on the back of the book or have it as a separate piece of paper. You don't need to have your words always on your page if you're worried about that interfering with the target. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about presenting and using two-dimensional pictures with kids with cortical visual impairment. Remember to go below to click on links to my website and to my book. And if you enjoyed this video, head on over to my website, Strategy to See, and join the email list to receive updates and information on other resources. Thank you. See you soon.